Good evening, everybody. Welcome. I know this is New York City, and so that means there's an endless number of amazing things to do. And so I want to start by thanking you all for deciding to share your evening with us. I'm David DeSteno, host of PRX's How God Works podcast, where we take a science-backed look at the roles religion and spirituality play in people's lives. And I'm honored that the good folks at PRX invited me to host this evening's event. I know it's going to be something really special, and I'm sure you're really going to enjoy it. I don't think it's an understatement to say that podcasting has grown in popularity, but when you look out at the landscape, it's often dominated by a few types of shows. There's the celebrity chat, there's the sports and news shows, then there's the gurus offering opinions and life hacks. And all of that is fine. We need all of that. But what's missing, at least to me, are podcasts that don't tell us what we should do or what we should think, or that just tell us what we want to hear and what we're expecting, playing up our own biases in our own echo chambers. What's missing are the voices that take us on a journey of discovery. Hosts that don't profess to know everything, but know the right questions to ask. Questions that touch on themes that are both of the moment and evergreen. Questions like, what does it mean to be a moral person or organization? And how do we do that at a time when our technology is fast outpacing old guardrails? What does it mean to be growing up in a faith that can pen you in morally and politically, yet lead you to sweet abandon with music? Or to hold a faith deeply, but have it reject you because who you love or how you present doesn't match up with the story of Adam and Eve? Or what does it really mean to be a mother? To bring life into the world and care for it, not knowing what the future will bring. Will you be enough? Will you be good at it? When we all think of our mothers, do we look back on it with joy or with regret? Tonight, we're going to hear from some new voices on these issues. They're not gurus, they're guides. They're inviting us on that journey of discovery with them. And to me, that's what makes a podcast exceptional. So let me close by thanking the John Templeton Foundation, who, with PRX, is supporting this project. I've worked with the foundation for many years now, and what I admire about them most is their willingness to fund research and outreach that push us not only to think big, but to feel deeply, to grapple with questions about the human experience and how to improve it. And I think you're going to get a little taste of that tonight. So let's begin. So the show is Mother is a Question, and I'm really happy to welcome the host, Julia Metzger-Traber and Tasha Haverty here to the Greene Space. So I want to start by asking both of you, what drew you to make this podcast, both personally and professionally?
I can start. Well, first and foremost, it was a chance to work with my best friend, which my favorite thing to do. I have been working in radio and sound in some way for 15 years, and a common yearning, because I've mostly been a journalist, is like you do these interviews and it's sometimes can feel sort of extractive, like you're interviewing someone and you're sort of listening for the pieces of tape you're going to put into your news story, and so much ends up on the cutting room floor, and you're haunted by someone or thinking about some conversation and all that they shared that no one's ever going to hear but you, the interviewer. And so for me, it was partly like, how do we make a space where that's what the thing is that space and that intimacy?
Yeah, and as I have a little bit of a loose mic. As Tasha said, one of the big sort of inspirations was just really to get to work together across our spaces. And so she's bringing a lot of that. And then I actually, like growing up, I think had really dismissed and taken for granted mothering as like a very uninteresting topic maybe, or like kind of dismissed all the work of that. And then it was actually as I was politicized around incarceration and the prison industrial complex, and then found out about people being shackled during childbirth, that I was like, there's something unbelievably powerful here that systems want to control. Like, what is this that we are afraid of how people love each other and bring in human life and care for each other? There's control here, which means there's power here, which means like this needs to be held sacred and protected. So I got invested and became a birth accompanier, a doula, and that was part of my life. And then I think as like further on doing more healing work in community and intergenerational healing, I was like, there's a lot to this question of mothering. And so that's been a big passion of mine. So then we kind of came together with this curiosity about like the intimacy, like the what is said in between and how we be with the unknown, and then these particular questions around mothering.
You know, and when I first heard the name of this podcast, and this is my own ignorance, I'll have to admit, I thought, that might not appeal to everyone because, you know, a mothering podcast, is it going to be about how to get your baby to sleep? Or what are the best diapers to buy? You know, all the checklist stuff that you hear out there. But then, you know, I thought about my own mom. She was 101. She just passed away in January.
Wow.
It was a long time to be with her. And I thought of the sacrifices that she made for me, the love that she showed me, and probably the pain and hopefully the joy that I caused her as I grew. And so let me ask you, why does talking about that side of mothering, that journey, matter?
Yeah, that was beautiful to hear about your mother. I think it's because it speaks to all of our humanity. I mean, none of us don't have an experience with being mothered in some way. And I think that in this moment in the world, we have a lot to learn and figure out about how we care for each other, how we express love and love each other through change and create new kinship models. And so I think there's a question of mothering and of what it is to mother. There's wisdom there that I think is kind of like world changing, is like, where do we go from here? How do we draw from ancient wisdom and also all the like new and explorations of queer kinship models in all different ways to figure out, how we stay alive on this earth and keep this earth alive. I think mothering is important for that. So all those things. And the deep tenderness that we don't see in our mothers. It's so taken for granted as well in this society.
Well, when I was listening to your first episode, I got a preview. All episodes the shows have launched, so please go find them. It was just the dynamics and the sense that this mother and son had of what their relationship meant and how it ebbed and flowed. And it made me reflect on things a lot, things that I wish I had done differently, but also what my mom was probably thinking along the way, and what my wife may be thinking when we were raising our kids.
Yeah, and how much we wish we could have asked those questions, like to the people we lose, or just don't think to that maybe that person's never been asked that question before. And that's kind of been like a motivating principle, is like, let's go to the people that have never been treated as experts and make them the sages of this show.
So how about for men? Why should men listen?
Well, I mean, I guess I would say, one of our guests actually in the next episode talks about this, about like, maybe mothering is just the exploration of like love without patriarchy. Like maybe it's how do we get more expansive about how we love and care for our children. And there's wisdom in what's been allowed within mothering that maybe past iterations of fathers haven't even been allowed to express love and nurturance in that way. And so or like affirming life. And so I think maybe it's like, well, fathers, how do you mother too? You know, like what do you learn from that?
Well,
Where's the wisdom there?
That's what's amazing to me, and that's what you were mentioning too. In this society, mothering doesn't necessarily depend on the biological sex that you came with. And for me, you know, it gives me a greater appreciation of what my mother, my grandmother, my wife, and everybody is dealing with. And so it just touched me deeply. But
Yeah.
it brings up another question, which is, I run a podcast. It's relentless. It's like, it's a lot of work, you know? And this isn't like, let's sit and talk for an hour. This is lots of interviews, lots of scripting, lots of deep thought. I know you're expecting and, you know, you're a mom, and I know people on your production team are mothering. How do you balance that?
Yeah, it's definitely something that we are trying to figure out because we're also working on other projects in our life, and mothering. And I'm sorry, I've been getting this call throughout. I'm just hoping they stop calling and that it's not my partner and my baby.
Are you okay? I mean, if you want to get it, you can get it.
No, well, let me just check.
Do you want me to go?
It's okay, really. I mean,
Yeah,
I know.
you know what? I think I do need to take this.
Okay.
I'm actually doing the live show right now. No, yeah, I'm actually at the live show right now. But no, you know that the pajamas that fit him are in the top drawer now. Yeah, remember, because I said I was going to move them before I went on this trip. No, it's fine. It's fine. I think they can wait for me. I'm sorry. He's really upset. Oh, God. You tried. You gave him a bath. Okay, because he needs a bath tonight. Oh, I can hear him. Maybe just put him on speakerphone for a second. Hi, baby. Hi, baby. I'm gonna sing. You ready to go to bed? Yeah. Maybe just stay with Daddy. I'm gonna sing you that song. Pale blue stars, way up yonder. Pale blue stars, way up yonder. Pale blue stars, way up yonder. Oh, my little soul's gonna shine, shine. All the little souls gonna shine, shine. Crescent moon, way up yonder. Crescent moon, way up yonder. Crescent moon, way up yonder. All the little souls gonna shine, shine. Mama's little soul's gonna shine, shine. This was the last day it was just us. Do you remember walking down the stairwell of your apartment building? I was visiting you for my 30th birthday. Every year it seems like we spend at least one of our birthdays together. We were walking down and down those stairs, you just a little bit ahead as always. And we got to this place on your block with little candles on the table, and we ate olives and drank red wine even though I don't drink. You were so free. That morning we'd gone on a walk in the park, remember? And we passed this family. You guessed they were from Afghanistan. The parents were trying to help their daughter fly a kite, and you turned to me and you said you didn't know if you'd ever want to be a mother, that you might not be cut out for it. I remember the way you compared us, how I'm the one who loves animals and kids and making food for people I love, and that kind of connecting would make me a good mom. I think about that line you drew between us on that walk all these years later. good mom, bad mom, who's more right for it, who would be happier. We had no idea that day that the next time we spoke, you'd be calling to tell me you were pregnant.
You remember when we were in the woods?
With Tasha?
Yeah.
Uh-huh. Tell me about it.
And we had like a snack and we were looking at a river.
Yeah, I remember that.
And Mama, you brought me some snacks.
Uh-huh. Yeah, we had a whole like lunch or something, didn't we? Yeah.
I honestly was not able to be the mother I wanted to be.
How you see yourself is not how they see you in their lives. So I think like that was like my constant biggest fear. I'm gonna get home and they're gonna hate me, or they're gonna think that I don't love them, or they're going to judge me.
To actually make the decision feels so scary. I have so much fear.
Like, I wish if I knew that I definitely didn't want to have kids, it would have made things a lot easier. I spent, I think, years feeling really ambivalent.
I was a reluctant parent, to be honest.
There is no way to survive in this world without depending on someone else.
And she said, I regret having children.
It was just natural to me. It just felt good to be a mother. I don't know how, but I know that it was always there.
This assumption that you can bear everything or that you can power through it and that you can do it alone.
I think there are ways in which we overlook the particular joys of motherhood as well.
Leaning more into joy and authenticity. I had to give myself what I would want for them.
And I always just want to ask, like, are you happy?
I'm so honored to have participated in the screening for the Big Questions Project. Over many years, PRX has done a number of open calls, of contests, and the first one was in 2007. PRX was a very new and young organization, but out of that contest, which is called the Talent Quest, we found Al Letson and Glenn Washington, who I'm so happy to say are still making some of the biggest shows in podcasting and radio. And then we did the PodQuest, and we've done a whole bunch of open calls along the way. And the thing about the Big Questions Project is that it's a good reminder of why we throw open the doors. And that is mostly so that we find ideas that we don't have on our own, that we are open to possibility and serendipity, and that this balance between openness and excellence is always an opportunity and a possibility. So I was really happy to do this one because it's also very specific on some of the biggest questions facing humanity. And the screening of the ideas was so meaningful because everything was so thoughtful. But the 4 that were chosen really represent the best. And just to say a little bit about what the best means, the best is, for us, is really opening up something that is inaccessible or closed, how we find empathy in the world, how humanity grows. We're looking for shows that really speak to the heart of us as people, and all 4 of the shows chosen for the cohort do that so well. And it also means that we look far and wide to tap into different communities and different subject matters that have cross-purpose and really can have multi-dimensional depth and meaning for both the makers, the listeners, and also people who engage with the content in any other way, like a live event like is going to happen, which I'm so excited about. So it's really hard to put your name in a hat and really kind of compete in one of these open calls. We make it tough intentionally so that really the best make it. And the 4 that we're going to hear from in the world, which I thought it would be helpful to pull a sentence from the grant application, because I found this very meaningful. Put the public in thoughtful discourse with exemplary thinkers focused on the deepest questions facing humanity. I think that really holds up from the trailers that I have heard. And I wish everyone the most success and the deepest connection with your audience. Thank you for taking this journey with us.
They don't even know about you. Seems like the world's getting cold. Like the whole world's on my shoulders. Trying to be the best I can be. I might cry, but no fold.
So the show is Second Sunday, and the hosts, who I'm happy to have with me, are Anna DeSteno and Esther Coro. One of the big questions we all face in life is, what do we believe? Is there something greater than us out there? And if so, what's our relationship to it, but also the community around us? Does that community welcome us? And what's it like if it doesn't? I get a feeling that Second Sunday tackles this question head on. Is that right?
Yeah. What gives you that feeling?
Listening to the episode. Okay. But tell me, what's the main driving issue, the main driving question?
So the main driving question is, can Black queer people actually reconcile with the Black Christian church? Right. Is that possible? Can we reconcile? Can there be a place where Black queer folks feel welcomed in Black Christian churches? And if we were to expand that, the Christian church in general.
How about you, Esther?
Yeah, and it's, for me, and the driving force around when we thought about kind of shaping some of these episodes is really about not even holding a space where people are there to argue with the institution, because I feel like we do that enough and I'm not interested in that, but it's like, what does that look like internally? So that's why we take such a storytelling approach to the podcast, because it's really about what it looks like for each individual person, specifically, not the theoretical ways that we talk about it necessarily when we zoom out and say institutionally we should do this, but what does reconciliation look like in each story? Yeah.
You mean you don't do what I do as a professor and just tell long, boring talks with data? That's right. So why the name Second Sunday? It's an interesting name.
It's really about taking a second look. Second Sunday holds significance, with Easter and things like that. But honestly, it was about taking a second look at the church, a second look at scripture, a second look at spirituality, and a second look at the journey that people take when they want to discuss, religion, spirituality in different spaces, because we didn't really feel like those spaces existed for queer people at all.
How about you? Any views on the name?
No, what Esther said.
Esther said. It's fair. So I think it's pretty well known that several faiths, as you mentioned, Christianity in particular, haven't always been welcoming to the queer community. Sometimes it can be actually hostile, but other times I think it can cause a more silent hurt. You know, exclusion itself is painful, and witnessing the exclusion and not acting makes it feel like maybe you yourself aren't discriminating or prejudiced, but it is in some ways a real tacit endorsement. And so, do you think that opening people's eyes and ears to the stories of Black queer people of faith can help with that? Is that why you want to do this?
So I think that's a possibility. But I think at the core of why I wanted to start this pod is because nearly every Black queer person I know has some type of spiritual foundation. Something. I get in a room with Black queer folks and we having church and I'm just like, what happened here? I thought we was hanging out. And in so many ways, I'm like, why can't we have these conversations in a public discourse, and why don't people hear our stories? And I think, you know, the word Christian and Christianity have been co-opted by a lot of right-wing people, right? But at the heart of it, if I love Jesus, I'm thinking about what would Jesus do and how would Jesus act? And in so many ways, we don't get the opportunity to hear those stories from Black queer folks who love Jesus. And I can be all of these things. I can be Black, I can be queer, and I can be Christian, and I can own that. And I think how everyone has chosen to reconcile their harm is so different and so beautiful that people need to hear what that is, because otherwise you'll feel like you're alone. And I know a lot of Black queer theologians and pastors, and sometimes I can take that for granted. There's a lot of people who don't know that those people exist. And so when you don't know that they exist, when you don't know that there is representation of you in the world, you can feel very isolated and alone. And I think this podcast gives people an opportunity to remember that they are not alone, that their story is not isolated, and that there is still love there for them.
Yeah. Esther, do you think it's harder for Black queer folks than people of other races who are queer and Christian?
You know, I never think about people of, no, I'm joking. What if I don't? Why do I have to?
What
is the
Esther's
question
role
you should
is
ask
on this
yourself.
podcast. Okay.
I'm the person who does not care that much. No, I don't know. Maybe we should ask them. I don't know. I do know that faith and spirituality is a very individual journey. Yeah. You know, even with this, the podcast tagline is Black queer folks finding, keeping, and sometimes losing faith. You know, and so really at the core, it's about figuring out how other people have done it for themselves, and it looks different. So, the stories are so varied in this podcast that you think you know what's going to happen, and you're like, I did not see that coming. So I'm sure it's difficult for everybody. You know, when you are at so many intersections, there's a whole host of things that can go wrong and make life harder for you. And of course, everyone's pain is valid, and it's, you know, that's the beautiful part about this podcast, is that when you look at these stories, it seems so specific, so very, very specific. There's so many universal things in it, and universal feelings, and I think that, yeah, I'm sure it's difficult for everybody because it's a difficult topic. You know, these are existentialist topics that make people reject openly the people that they're supposed to naturally love, like your family. Feels like it is their existentialist and spiritual duty to reject you, to say something. So I don't know if it matters who you are, but certainly life has been no crystal stair for Black queer folks. But you know, that pain is definitely universal.
Yeah, I mean, this is always the thing that's always in some ways surprised me, although I see it. You know, I mean, if you're a Christian, Jesus ate with the sinners, and I'm using air quotes around the word sin, but it was all about love. It was all about welcoming people, whoever they are, meeting them where they were, and forming that community. But I think you're right. For whatever reason, this issue gets a lot of people riled up and causes a lot of pain and a lot of exclusion. Who do you hope to reach with the podcast? What's your audience?
Gay people. No.
Yeah.
Them too.
Specifically.
I want us to tell the stories for Black queer folks who often don't feel seen or heard. I mean, I think that is our primary audience. I also think it's people who are interested in hearing those stories and maybe wanting to do something different in their own lives and how they show up at church or not show up at church, or how they embrace the next queer person that they encounter, right? To Esther's point, I think these stories are universal, but we are clear that we want to talk about this particular experience because the church for Black communities is the cornerstone of so much. It's where you oftentimes begin and end. And so when you come out as a queer person to your family, if your family rejects you, and then you come out and you go to church and then your church rejects you, these are the first two places that you actually form love. And so now when people who tell me that they love me no longer love me, that type of harm and hurt causes ripple effects that we could go on and on about here. And so it is those people that I hope are inspired by the way that the people who are on our pod have overcome or gotten through those impossible moments of hurt and harm. And some people leave the church altogether. Some people ain't got no faith, which is understandable. Some other people double down on their faith. And I think that all the varied ways that people have reconciled with that, those are the people that I hope we talk to in this pod.
I see it as a survival guide, really, at the end of the day, because we don't have a space to talk about it. If you're pro gender expression, pro LGBTQ, usually those spaces are pretty belittling of faith and spirituality, and especially Christianity, because it's been co-opted by white Christian nationalism in its most extreme, and then also just different variations of conservatism across cultures. So there is no space to discuss faith and spirituality in a space that seems to be for liberation and diversity, which I think is very strange. But I understand, because the church hasn't done itself any favors in that sense. But with that comes silencing, because the church is such a cultural staple, especially in the lives of Black people in general. I mean, it permeates our music, our culture, everything across the diaspora. To not hold room for people to examine what that means for them and mourn what has been lost, I think that is also really important, because there is a loss of community, a loss of fellowship. And as far as I have seen, I mean, people talk about the disappearance of third spaces, for example, in our society. The fellowship and the community that comes with church is unmatched, and I haven't seen it replicated in the same way anywhere else in modern society. So that intricacy of that type of fellowship means that there's a big void that is created when you are rejected actively from the culture and the institution, and from even continuing to explore your faith in general on a personal level. And if we don't leave room for people to just be like, damn, like, then of course, what do you do with that vacuum? You just pretend like it isn't that big of a deal because everybody expects you to be like, forget those people. And it's like, I can't, because I love them, and I think they love me too in a way, but everybody's on their own journey, and sometimes people's journeys will cut both ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, putting my professor hat on for a minute, my How God Works hat on, and one of the things we often talk about on that show is that whatever you think about the faith, and everybody's own spiritual beliefs are up to them, but having that community, having that support is really important to people's well-being. And it sounds like in the Black community, it's even a greater source of extended family and love than in some other groups. And to lose that, to be rejected by people who you love and who you thought loved you, it's got to be immensely painful. The people that you spoke with, are they finding ways back or to deal with that?
You have to listen to the podcast.
All right, no spoilers. No spoilers, but we do have clips.
Oh, yeah.
So
of course.
Let's take a listen.
So in '97, I went to St. Xavier University in Chicago, Illinois. I'd been very active in my Catholic church, but now I'm in college, so I'm really active on campus. And this was back in the day, Ellen DeGeneres had just come out.
Why can't I just say the truth? I mean, be who I am. I'm 35 years old.
And when she came out, I came out too.
Susan, I'm gay.
You were right behind you, like, come on, Ellen.
It's like she opened that door, and I said, hey, y'all, me too. I'm like, Ellen. And it was so important for Ellen to come out because my roommate at the time had stumbled upon some things that suggested to him that I might be gay, and he was trying to blackmail me. And I said, no, you won't.
Whoa.
I was secure. Yeah, I was secure enough in my relationships with my family and my Catholic church. We didn't do a bunch of hard anti-gay preaching. So I was like, oh no, you have no power here. And I decided I was gonna come out to take away his threat.
Who was that?
So that's Darren. So Darren is actually the co-host of this podcast with Esther. And and Darren, we wish he could be here. We miss Darren being here. He is the first guest of the podcast. He's episode 1 that dropped yesterday. And he talks about his experience actually going through this conversion experience of actually leaving everything behind and people trying to pray the gay away from him for about 8 years. Is an unbelievable story. And why we wanted to play that particular clip is to show the dynamics between Esther and Darren, and that even in these very unbelievably hard conversations, somehow they still laugh.
Yeah, I'm always going to crack a joke.
Yes, that part.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I think Darren's story is so powerful because in his case, the conversion therapy experience and leaving everything behind, at one point, he was on a $50 a week stipend from this church. Is that even in the face of all of that, he is still in church. He still loves Jesus. And he talks about that, and he talks about how he, even though that experience was that, he doesn't wish them any harm. As a matter of fact, he still wishes them all the love in the world, and he hopes that they realize what they're doing, but he wants to be a light. He works in the church actively. That is his job.
Christian band.
He's in a Christian band that travels around the country. Darren's story is very powerful, so I think you should listen to episode 1.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, Darren does not wish them harm. I, on the other hand,
we had to put that in the pod.
At all.
You're not.
Don't. So this next clip that we're going to play is one that was probably the hardest, not probably, it was definitely the hardest episode for me to put together. And it's because it really taught me a lot about challenging how I view people's reactions and how people deal with certain situations. So this clip features Carmarian Anderson-Harvey, who's an amazing Black woman of trans experience who comes from a family of faith leaders and is herself a faith leader. It's an amazing episode, and every time I thought that I knew where this story was gonna go, it challenged me. So yeah, let's just play it.
When my dad got up to start teaching in the pulpit, and he started off with, sharing that he's going to share some things. He called me out by name, and that was his way of getting my attention. And he began to say, God is displeased with your lifestyle, and I cannot be your pastor and condone and allow you to come in here. And if you don't like the rules of this church and the standard of holiness, then you can end your membership here and you can get out from the church. I think I was more shocked because felt like I was being outed. But my mom, I was very close to, and I could see my mom back of her head, and I could just see the tension in her neck, how she really wanted to embrace and look at me, but she just kept her eyes glued, to the pulpit. And because of that, in my mind, at that early age, it made me feel that that's also how she believed as well. And so I packed my stuff up. I was carrying a cute purse that age, purses was in then. With my clog shoes, with my slacks. I was not at that time wearing dresses to church. Because you're talking about 3 years of my transition, and so I'm still evolving. And I packed up my stuff and I left. I left, and that was the last time for quite some time that they actually saw me.
And I just want to say one thing about this clip. This is a tearjerker. I cried during the interview. I think we always think about love in that condescending way when we talk about Christianity, and it always is coming from one direction to the other, right? You know, people want to keep you in their orbit because they love you with the love of God, but you know, we don't like what you're doing, but we love you and things like that, and we only ever think about the love of God in that direction. But this story really forced me to like look at what it meant for the love of God to be coming from the other direction as well, because Carmarian's story is intricately linked with her faith, and her decisions are intricately linked with her faith, and how things evolved with her family over decades was intricately linked with all of their faith. And it's an amazing story that kind of forces you to stop and realize that everyone is on their own journeys, and regardless of, you know, what we think and what we want and how we think reconciliation and apologies and all of these things should happen, it's like sometimes people just have to go through what they go through, you know?
Yeah, that's episode 3, so just follow so you don't miss that, okay?
And we have clip 3, right?
Yeah, clip 3 is Reverend Benjamin Reynolds. He's a good friend. He is a powerful preacher who was ministering this really huge church in Colorado Springs. And the story goes that he went to this protest. Wasn't it a protest?
Yeah.
Okay.
Are you going to give away the episode,
I'm not.
Anna?
Okay, I'm not.
Okay.
No, I'm not
Oh.
going to give away the episode. But just know that there was this moment that he was basically outed. But let's listen to the clip. I don't want to give away too much. Esther already told me.
You set up a meeting on, you know, where the church is going to go in terms of gay. Everybody who's been a member of the church in the last 400 years shows up. So the place was just packed with people. They were swinging from the chandeliers. It was just crazy. And so I had a packed house to tell them, you know, I am gay. I've always been gay. I've been trying to tell the world all these years I'm gay. And the only thing I regret is that I haven't done it sooner.
Yeah. But he did it. Benjamin's is episode 2. And one thing I will say is that I spent some time in an organization called the Church Within a Church movement. And the whole movement was started because pastors were being kicked out of their churches for being LGBTQ. And if you don't know much about how that works, like if someone thinks you're gay, they can tell somebody else who then puts you on trial. And these trials go on, like this still happens today. I know it sounds like I'm talking about the 1600s, okay? But today, someone could be put on trial. And if they find that in fact you are LGBTQ, then you get kicked out. And to be kicked out means you lose your livelihood, you lose your pension. Like if you live in the house that's associated with the church, now you also don't have anywhere to live. There are huge repercussions. And so this organization actually welcomes those folks in and gives them a place where they can do their ministry. And so Benjamin being in the closet for so long wasn't just because he wanted to tell them, it was because it was his livelihood and it was his community. And the moment they found out that he was gay, just to give away a little piece, a deacon came up to him and said, is this going to be a gay church now? And it took him aback, of course. And he's like, I've always been gay and this ain't been no gay church, right? He didn't say that to him, but that's really the implications. And his story is really beautiful. He goes through a lot of emotions. Today, he is still a pastor. He's a teacher, you know, but the healing that had to happen after that experience, if you can imagine coming out to 400 people and then them telling you you're no longer welcome here, you know.
Well, thank you for bringing that message. I think about, we're doing an episode on my show about queer people of faith. And the one thing that I remember reading in the scriptures is John the Apostle says, you know, where there is love, God abides. Doesn't say only this type of love or that type of love. Love is a rare and sacred thing, and I really hope that people embrace that view that wherever it is, we should celebrate it, not restrict it.
I think that our call is to draw the circle wider.
Yeah.
Right. One of our interviewees, hopefully in season 2, Mark Miller, he wrote this beautiful song called "Draw the Circle Wide," and I think that is what we must do. We must reclaim the word Christian in a way that we think about what would Jesus be in this moment. And I think if we think and we center that, and we center love, and we, gosh, the world would just be such a better place.
Well, keep pushing that message, because I've seen too many paintings of Jesus with an AK-47 these days. So,
And I don't think he would like that.
I don't think he would like that either.
Yes.
But I see it, and so I thank you for bringing that message out.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Chief Development Officer at PRX, and it was such a privilege to be asked to sit on the Big Questions Project selection committee. I loved reading all of the proposals, and this project really fits with PRX's mission so perfectly. PRX is around to unlock opportunities, to take risks on voices that other places won't take risks on, and the Templeton Foundation's support and partnership and the Big Questions Project makes all that so possible. Like, look at these 4 selections that rose to the top and made it through to the top 4 that we're making. The mother question, like mothering being a question, I love that because you can find a million podcasts about like what to feed your kid or what a joy motherhood is or like what to do when your kid has the terrible twos. This is a podcast that tells the truth about mothering and what makes a mother, what doesn't make a mother, and all the questions that go with that. The one on technology and the hazards and the innovation, I love that because there's such toxicity in technology and we all deal with it. But this podcast is taking it in a whole different direction using like the African diaspora, like wellness and spirituality to try to help us through our everyday kind of addiction and attachment to technology. The one on church for Black and queer folks, I love that so much because, church should be like open and accepting and loving, but so many shut people out. And what if you want to have a spiritual life in a church and be a part of an organized religion, but they don't want you? Just the feelings around that are so deep and not a lot of people are talking about it. And then Christian music for like kids. I don't know anything about it. Someone in my team grew up listening to it and then left the church, and she's really excited to listen to it because she is going to feel nostalgic, but really conflicted. And I'm going to listen to it because I know nothing about it. I know none of the songs. I know this word like Amy Grant. I think she sang some songs, but I don't know anything else. So PRX unlocks stories, unlocks voices, except for the mothering one, which I know a lot about. Everything else is voices that I have never heard, and I cannot wait to listen. So thank you to the Templeton Foundation, thanks to PRX where I work, and thanks to the Big Questions. Bye.
Thanks. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jason Saldana, who's the Chief of Business Development at PRX, and Stephanie Kuo, who's the Director of Content Development. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, David.
So, I want to start by asking you something, since I'm in this business too, which is podcasting is kind of at an inflection point in some ways. Irrational exuberance, to use that old term, is over. And so where do you two see podcasting heading?
You go first. So today, our colleagues at WNYC, 40 of them lost their positions. The industry is in a very difficult moment. However, at the same time, it opens up opportunities for a project like this, where people who want to do something because they want to tell a story can be supported by an organization like PRX and Templeton to make the best version of that story, as opposed to trying to become stars, trying to become millionaires, because that is less possible today than it was 3 years ago. And so you have to be doing this for the love of the game. And our job at PRX is to try to bring as many shows that wouldn't have a chance to get exposed to an audience as many times as possible. So we're grateful to the people who went through this process, and our hope is audiences are affected and that audio can be, at its best, a big empathy machine. And that's our mission, and in moments of sort of very difficult financial times, mission is what counts. And so for us, it just helps us double down on our mission.
I'll add to that too, that I give this talk quite a bit because part of my job prior to becoming the director of content development was the director of training. So what I did was train independent podcasters, journalists at organizations who want to make podcasts. And a question that we got all the time was, have I missed the boat? Like, is it a bubble that's going to burst? Have I missed my opportunity? And I think that conversation became even more prevalent with the layoffs and with the news about shows being canceled and departments being eliminated. And as sad and tragic as that is, I think what we've realized now is that there's an inflection point, there's a recalibration, there's a releveling of the industry, because in the past 5 years, it was all about more, bigger, more, how much more money can we pump into this? And now it's the realization that it's not the quantity, it is the depth of content we can provide, it is the meaningfulness, it is the integrity of the content we can provide people. And I think Big Questions is doing that. It is an antithesis to a lot of what was happening in a massive boom. And what we're seeing now is a good faith effort to try to come back to a place where the medium can be powerful and not just humongous.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you about that because, as I said at the top, you know, there are a lot of podcasts out there. A lot of them are celebrity-driven if you have a platform that helps. Or they're news-driven or guru-driven, but you hear facts, you get life hacks. There are some great fiction ones. You know, there's lots of great storytelling. But this initiative is something entirely different, right? It's struggling with questions that you can't get a quick answer to and that nobody really has the answer to in some ways. We're all struggling with the human experience. And so what was it about, or let me say it this way, where did the idea for this initiative come from? Because as you said, it seems kind of antithetical to the usual business model here in terms of what shows tend to be about. It's a risk, so why did PRX want to do it?
Well, I'll say that there is a podcast for everybody out there, and if you want guru-driven life hacks and that's meaningful to you, then all the power to you and those creators. For us, I think when I pull up a slide, a presentation of all the top grossing podcasts, the most successful podcasts, they're all the same thing. And what gets lost in that is everything that can be done that aren't those things. And that we just had this conversation yesterday with the teams, which was, you know, you see these are the top podcasts like The Daily, Huberman Lab, The Ben Shapiro Show, Morbid, Crime Junkie. If you were to hold yourself to those standards, like to those standards of success, we would all just be making the same show over and over and over again, and there'd just be nothing for everybody. And even though we're at an inflection point, the vast majority of this world has not had a chance to listen to a podcast or create a podcast. And our goal at PRX in our training, our content development has always been to give space to ideas and to projects that don't inherently get the funding and get the attention. And so I think for us, our biggest goal is just provide space where there hasn't been space, and that's why we're here.
I mean, if you look at our portfolio of radio shows, This American Life, The Moth, Snap Judgment, Reveal, Latino USA, The World, Left, Right, and Center, No Small Endeavor, The Ezra Klein Show. Many of those are legacy shows that were at the cusp of the podcasting boom. I think This American Life and The Moth have been disproportionate in their influence. But it is because we gave them a platform and a distribution mechanism that they exist. And then in 2014, we created a network called Radiotopia with shows like Ear Hustle and Song Exploder, 99% Invisible, Criminal, that also did the same thing. That's in our mission, is to create opportunity that opens up content in a non-saturated market. Mm-hmm. So here, I think about the existential all the time. That's why I loved your show. And to be able to have the privilege of being able to work with teams that interrogate the existential is something that I feel very lucky to be a part of. And that I feel that our organization is lucky to have subsidized this.
Well, and it goes both ways. For those of you who don't know anything about my show, which probably most of you don't, I remember when we were talking about doing it, I was talking to Jason, and I said, I have this idea. And he's like, this is great. And so we had a meeting, and he said, what do you want to do in your first show? And I said this, and it was like silence. And it was like, I had an idea, but I was trained as an academic. If I did a podcast on my own, it would sound like a guy in his basement blathering on and about too much detail and this and that. And what I got from PRX was advice and support and marketing of how to tell the story I want, how to engage with people in ways that most of us aren't trained to do. And so that's what I find so fascinating about this, and that excites me so much, is that it's a wonderful partnership, because in some ways, well, you guys would exist without us, but we certainly wouldn't exist without you. And the support and the willingness to help tell those stories in ways that we never could have on our own. And by the we, I mean me and the folks in this project. It's just a blessing.
Well, sustainability in art is very hard, right? There's a lack of patronage that exists in the marketplace. And monetization from advertising is a very volatile and fickle strategy. So when there's an opportunity to partner with Templeton to support creators who would have much more difficult paths to visibility, I think that's what we should be doing as an organization. That's from our radio perspective, from our podcast perspective, from our engagement perspective. That's core to who we are. We are not Spotify. We are not Amazon. We will never be. But that's why I work at PRX.
Fair enough. So Stephanie, I'm sure this project was pretty popular, right? In that you got a lot of applications, I'm sure. And so what was the process like? How did you and the committee go through and make choices? It must have been difficult.
Yeah, I have experience evaluating applications from as few as 6 to 10,000. And this was right kind of, the 10,000 application period was anybody with a podcast in the world, you should apply. And so that we shot ourselves in the foot with that one. But with a project like this, where we're like, you have to be at the intersection of these places, we were actually thinking, let's hope for 50 applications, right? We got close to 200, and that it was a multi-pronged process of, we need to be able to scan and then do another level deeper, another level deeper, another level deeper, until an entire committee can sit there confidently and say, these are the 4 that we're ready to do. And what that entails is a bunch of scoring, a bunch of conversations, and a lot of disagreements, and the ability to, and every person having to be able to say why, and not only why we like it, but why it furthers the mission of both organizations. What is the potential of the show in the market? Do we see it growing in a way that's sustainable and interesting and compelling and meaningful? And so for us, as someone who has developed the majority of how we evaluate applications, it's not enough to like something. It's not enough to be like, I personally am excited about this show. I have to be able to defend it on multiple levels. So, and like to what Carrie Hoffman said, it is going through that level of interrogation, and to make it to the final 4, you have traversed mountains and multiple landscapes to get to where you are, because our review process is rigorous on purpose. And we also build an application that's kind of hard on purpose too, because we want you to be able to know why you're doing this.
Yeah, when I saw that, I was like, oh, I'm glad I got in before that application came out. You think college essays are hard. So Jason, before I let you go, I'm sure you had a plan of how you wanted this all to work out, but has anything surprised you along the way?
The quality of the shows is exceeded my expectations. The diversity of the content has exceeded my expectations. The fact that we are spanning so many different content verticals in these 4 shows is kind of mind-boggling, right? And I feel very lucky that we are able to give these shows 2 full seasons of support, right? If it was just 1 episode, or it was just a handful of episodes, that is not substantive enough to demonstrate what you can do in this space. The fact that they have basically a year of support is very meaningful and will help them grow as storytellers. And their first episode will be very different than the last episode. And if, as purveyors of what I hope is quality content, that is the outcome, then it's been a very successful project.
Yeah.
I also want to give 2 shout-outs. So Genevieve, Jocelyn, Morgan, the people on the production team are physically and emotionally invested in all these shows. They care about how well they do and how well the experience is for these producers. And that's rare, right? They have a lot of other work on their plate, and to care that much is unique. And then Courtney, who is running this entire project, is a very special person and somebody who took this on. This is a very complex logistical project. Just, you have no idea how much it takes to make this happen. And this guy came in on his own and has had little interference from me to run this whole thing. And I think the outcome is mostly a testament to his ability to navigate logistics and bring this all together. So I'm very, very proud to be working with Courtney.
Yeah, Courtney. And let me say, as a content creator who never thought he would be creating this type of content, I want to thank you both, and PRX in general, and Genevieve and Jocelyn, and everybody who's working on this, because it really is a privilege as a creator, not only to get the financial support, which comes for these projects in my podcast from Templeton, but just the wisdom of how to do this and how to tell stories. And I think wherever any of us go that you're seeing tonight, that wouldn't happen without this. And so I want to give a hand to PRX for supporting that, because many companies wouldn't. So thank you both.
Thank you, guys.
We've got a 10-minute intermission. Please also go to the lobby. There are free t-shirts. And we'll see you soon.
Hi, Tashi. It's my only time alone lately. I'm feeling really untethered. Like, I don't remember myself or something. I'm also just flooded with shame about this pregnancy. And on top of that, I don't know how to show up for Odessa and Shaya the way I want to right now. I'm not me. I feel like a terrible mother. But then last night was so joyous, Tosh. We were all cuddling and laughing hysterically. And their soft little bodies up against mine. And I just had this feeling of pure presence. I don't know. It's a spiral, I guess. I miss you. What is a mother? What is a mother?
What is a mother?
I honestly was not able to be the mother I wanted to be.
That was like my constant biggest fear. I'm gonna get home and they're gonna hate me, or they're gonna think that I don't love them, or they're going to judge me.
To actually make the decision feels so scary. I have so much fear.
Will this darkness that opened inside me ever close up again?
I felt protective of him in utero, but I don't know that I loved him.
And she said, I regret having children.
What could mothering look like in the future?
There is no way to survive in this world without depending on someone else.
This assumption that you can bear everything or that you can power through it and that you can do it alone.
Where is the true me?
I think there are ways in which we overlook the particular joys of motherhood as well.
Leaning more into joy and authenticity. I had to give myself what I would want for them.
What does it mean to hold that, to claim it, to be it?
I'm Julia Metzger-Traber.
And I'm Tasha Haverty.
Julia and I have been best friends for a long time.
Now we're both raising tiny humans, mothering, on the precipice of a tectonically shifting culture.
Join us in the depths of mothers' minds, hearts, and stories.
Mothers from all walks and stages of life.
As we listen for the unspeakable and break open what it means to mother.
What is a mother, we ask, and everything answers.
Mother is a Question, part of PRX Productions' Big Questions Project. Starts October 4th. Listen wherever you get your podcasts.
Can we just be honest? everybody knows that there are gay people in the church.
You're not lying. We're the choir directors, the missionaries, the acolytes, and even the preachers.
And we go to church, showing up every Sunday looking for love and grace just like everybody else. But for queer folks, and queer Black folks specifically, that love can be hard to find.
I became so angry with God, particularly on Sundays. Like, where in the hell am I supposed to go to church?
The Black church is the site of my deepest trauma. The Black church is the place that formed me and humiliated me.
I'm Darren.
And I'm Esther.
And this is Second Sunday, a podcast about Black queer folk finding, keeping, and sometimes losing faith.
We'll talk to theologians, artists, activists, and community members living at the intersections of faith, spirituality, and identity.
This is what inclusion looks like. This is what a church community should look like. A place where everyone is welcome, where I'm not afraid to name myself, and I'm not afraid to name you as being welcome.
And we'll ask them and ourselves if there can be reconciliation between the church and its queer congregants.
But for me, right, the truest essence of the Black church is an institution that thrives and prides itself on pursuing unadulterated liberation for Black people in a space and world that refuses to see Black people as human.
You know the Saints ain't ready for this.
No, they are not, but we are still going to talk about it. Catch Second Sunday from the Cube and PRX's Big Questions Project, available wherever you get podcasts.
$1999 was quite a year for pop. The top 40 was full of pop princesses. Remember Baby One More Time by Britney Spears? And boy bands. Who could forget I Want It That Way by the Backstreet Boys?
You might be stunned to learn that one of the biggest selling singles that year was one by a band with a couple of kids who met at a church retreat.
Was Sixpence None the Richer a band of Christians or a Christian band? To some, the very idea of Christian rock is a contradiction in terms.
To others, it's something worthy of praise.
But love it or hate it, what you might not know is that it was a billion-dollar business that shaped American culture.
From PRX and the Big Questions Project, Rock That Doesn't Roll is a new podcast that examines the impact of an industry that deserves a second look.
They just see Christian band, okay, then all of a sudden, like, it's, they're screaming into the mic and like everything's as loud as humanly possible and kids are just flailing their arms like they're possessed by a spirit and they're like, oh my God, what do we get ourselves into?
Each episode, the show explores a world whose music has power to move hormonal teenagers more than any sermon.
Watching a woman, a girl you're in love with, raising her hands to God with her eyes closed in ecstasy. I'm sorry, folks, it doesn't get any better than that. Why wouldn't you fall in love with Christ? Are you kidding me?
The angels come in the room when I listen to the song, and they flap their wings, and I fall on the floor, and I weep gently. I can't just say no to that.
It's a subculture that's a little bit Christian
and a little bit rock and roll.
This sounds like I'm making this up, but there were explosions on stage. They had pyrotechnics in the church gymnasium.
Join us as we go back to a time when secular acts like Nirvana weren't the only bands inspiring teens to hurl themselves into the mosh pit.
We couldn't have sex, we couldn't drink, we couldn't cuss. So, let's get out here and just sort of like elbow each other for half an hour and then we'll pray and thank God and we'll go home. So it was, kind of fun.
But was it all effective? Did CCM actually make more teenagers turn to Christ?
They were like, you have let Satan into the building. That's what they said.
And what about the artists? Could true creative expression survive all the extra stress? Or did they have to leave the Christian bubble for that?
It seemed like we were all ex-Christian bands. We all decided at the same time to take the plunge into the world.
This is a show about what happens when an industry forms a new holy trinity: faith, fandom, and fortune, and the people caught in the middle.
And I just thought, what is this? But then I immediately was like, well, this is not Christian, so I can't like this. Just file that away. that was amazing. That's not for me.
There was a guy that made stickers in the scene and it said, keep your Bible out of my ska punk, boycott 5 Iron Frenzy. And we would put the stickers on our shirts and wear them.
I didn't think of that as a Christian decision. I felt like that was being true to who we are as a band. Like, Jimmy World would never do that. Rage Against the Machine would never do that. Like, that's just not who we are.
Listen to Rock That Doesn't Roll from PRX and the Big Questions Project.
Starting October 4th, wherever you get your podcasts.
In our increasingly connected world, a new form of trauma is emerging. An insidious pain point called moral injury. It's a deep discomfort that arises when our actions or the actions of others violate our most profound moral or ethical beliefs.
Just take our digital age, which sometimes feels like it's doing more harm than good. We're losing control, and it can be overwhelming.
So here's the question. Can we ever truly mend the damage that our tech is causing us? That is, what could moral repair look like? And who's responsible for mending what's been broken?
This isn't just about patching systems, it's about healing people.
Technology serves humanity, not the other way around.
Welcome to Moral Repair, a Black exploration of tech, a podcast about the innovations that make our world, break our societies, and ways all of us can heal.
We're your hosts.
I'm Ananda Barclay, a death doula, moral injury researcher, and chaplain who's concerned with the quality of a life well lived and cherishes the relational stories people share.
And I'm Keisha McKenzie, a technical communicator and strategist with a knack for asking tough questions and making experts accessible.
We'll be your guides through a maze of digital dilemmas, seeking to answer the big question, who's responsible for the moral repair we so badly need in the technology sector? And what should that healing look like?
Let's explore these complex issues. Let's take a hard look at the technology that powers our world and distorts it.
And let's start the process of repair together. Join us for Moral Repair, a Black exploration of tech, launching this fall.
Everybody, if you wouldn't mind taking your seats again, please. We're getting ready to start. All right, folks. Our next show is Rock That Doesn't Roll. Go for it.
Daddy, Daddy, do you miss me? The way I crawled upon your knee, those childish games of hide and seek, now I seem a million miles away. Am I lost in some illusion? Am I what you thought I'd be? And now it seems I find myself in need to be forgiven? Is there still room upon that knee? If I give my life, if I lay it down, can you turn this life around, around? Can I be made clean by this offering of my soul? Can I be made whole again? Have I labored all for nothing? Trying to make it on my own. I fear to reach out for the hand of one who'd understand me. Say I'd rather be here all alone. It's all my fault. I sit and wallow in seclusion, as if I had no hope at all. I guess truth becomes you. I have seen it all in motion. Pride comes before a fall. If I give my life, if I lay it down, can you turn this life around, around? Can I be made clean by this offering of my soul? Can I be made whole again? Can I offer up this simple prayer? Pray it finds a simple ear, scratching your infinite time, notwithstanding my fallings, notwithstanding my crimes. If I give my life, if I lay it down, can you turn this life around, around? Can I be made clean by this offering of my soul? Can I be made whole if I give my life, if I lay it down? Can you turn this life around and around? Can I be made clean by this offering of my soul? Can I be made whole
Jennifer Knapp, give it up. Thank you. So the name of the show is Rock That Doesn't Roll, and I want to welcome Andrew Gill and Lee Payne to the stage. Let me start by asking you a basic question, which is, how did you get interested in doing a podcast on Christian rock? Were you fans, or was it just a phenomenon that interested you?
I mean, for me, I grew up listening to it. My family only allowed us to buy that kind of music until my older brother convinced them it was okay when I was probably like 12 or so, or 11, yeah. And, you know, all my life it's been this sort of like skeleton in my closet a little bit, you know? And, I mean, you know. But no, and I just felt like with the rise of evangelicals, white evangelicals, we actually need to like look at what that culture, you know, has done in American society. So,
and how about you, Lee?
Yeah, for me, well, my first job out of college, I worked as an assistant to a contemporary Christian music, or a producer who did some contemporary Christian music. I didn't know that much about it for a lot of different reasons, but and then I went on to graduate school, became an American religious historian,
And I couldn't get this thought out of my head, like, no one is really paying attention to what this thing, contemporary Christian music, also known as CCM, how powerful it was in people's lives. So as a historian, I studied, like dogma and theology and denominational policies and things like that. And then I thought, but what about all that music? Like, what was that doing to people? And so I wrote a book. It's called God Gave Rock and Roll to You, and it's a history of contemporary Christian music, and it's out in January. I think my editor would want me to say that. But along the way, I wrote this survey that just invited people to weigh in on what CCM did in their lives. And I was expecting like 50 maybe responses, hoping for that. And I got over 1,200. People just from all over the world just wrote in. And I really was excited about learning about individual stories because people shared like very deep things. I'm just this random person putting something out on social media, and they were like, this is my whole life story. And I had asked, who was your favorite artist? A lot of people said Jennifer Knapp, by the way. And then they would just say, I'm going to tell you everything about myself. And so when I met Andrew, it was such a huge opportunity to profile how people's lives were changed by this music.
Well, that's what's so interesting about it, because it's a real kind of, it's a cultural phenomenon, but it's also in some sense sacred music. Most of us, when we think about sacred music, we think about Brahms or Bach or Gregorian chant, but music throughout history has been a way for people to kind of connect with something bigger. And so it's not just a cultural and political phenomenon, it's also a form of worship. So I mean, Jennifer, was that what it was for you? Is that a way at the time to kind of touch something more?
Yeah. I mean, I actually got my start doing that because I was an evangelical convert in college. So I didn't grow up around any of this. I had no idea that Christian music existed.
Really?
So as a part of, just as a creative person, as a songwriter, and sitting and writing my poetry and playing my guitar, I just basically started to kind of process all of this Christian culture and church and all these things that were coming at me in my own private time, and started to write about that. I had no idea that I would ever end up like sharing this out in public. I wrote that song in my little dorm room, and then I played it for my church. And I had no idea that there were radio stations and this entire industry. I had no aspirations of being a recording artist in that sense. And then, later on down the line, getting into that culture is obviously was a pretty wild experience to be able to do that and still be doing that all these years later. But I think one of the defining things about it is like it's one of the few genres in the world that's very specific. It doesn't matter what kind of stylistic flavor you have. It's particularly with contemporary Christian music, it's very intent on having this very specific dogma, language, and ideology. And as a songwriter, I was kind of always resisting that a little bit, or toying with it and playing with it, and I still do that today, even though I'm not inside of that industry. So I think there are some things that are really not dissimilar in the fact that contemporary Christian music exists. I think at the end of the day that there are people who do write and create and write about their spiritual lives. Does it end up in contemporary Christian music? Probably not, unless you're kind of towing this very particular line. So it's really interesting when we get into conversations about what music always kind of does for us and makes these mile markers, the soundtracks of our lives. When you have this kind of very specific cultural one, it becomes a very interesting story inside of it.
Well, I mean, that's interesting, because the song you played, Whole Again, was when was that written?
I wrote that probably in like 1996 or 97, and there's no mention of God in it, really. It's actually a song that a lot of people think I'm singing to God the Father, and I'm actually singing to my own dad. So, but it's a mod. Like for me, I thought I was writing about family and spiritual tension, and then transferring that later into the song. And for me, that made sense, and it immediately happened. The church got it, and they understood that. But that kind of music probably wouldn't make it. Wouldn't probably get me a record deal today, because I'm not talking specifically about Jesus or specifically about something evangelical, which is something I enjoyed skirting around, but also enjoyed kind of, I don't know why I was successful in that field, because I was always kind of trying to blur the lines of where that was at, because I didn't come from that, and I really wanted to be able to have as much freedom inside of that to explore some really serious spiritual questions. Yeah.
Well, talent shines through. That's why, I think. But do you think the reception today would be different?
Well, it doesn't exist today. I mean, if you look at the marketplace as it stands, I would say it's largely worship music, so it's very God-centered. With a lot of the decades that you guys are going to be talking about, late 90s, early 2000s, there were a lot of artists like myself who were just normal rock and roll people writing about our lives and our experience with the blossoming or this blooming, especially inside of youth culture of evangelical Christianity. So I think that comes out in its rock and roll just like any other cultural artifact. But artists like me or Caedmon's Call, Derek Webb, Jars of Clay, artists like that aren't around anymore. It's just people who are basically fulfilling the kind of Hillsong, Sunday morning praise and worship band catalog.
So Lee and Andrew, taking up on what Jennifer's saying, why do you think it's narrowed or changed? What has kind of been the trajectory of it?
Well, there's business answers to that. There's, you could answer it in any number of ways. But, one thing, I work, my day job is music journalism, just not specific to the Christian world. And we know that CD sales peaked in like 2001, and so when there's less economic incentive, there's going to be less industry around it. So, there's less money to be made.
But how about that narrowing to dogma?
Well, I mean, oh gosh, boy, that's such a really great question.
I think
yes, no. There's a lot of everyone seems to have a different answer, and I think one of the things that I've said before when people ask that question has to do with how people worship. So more and more evangelical Christians worship in megachurches, and the music of megachurches is the Hillsong music, Jesus culture. There are many different kinds of music, and so I think some of it, there's so many answers. Wait, I'll talk about it in the book, but I think that's one major one is how these communities are gathering.
And so you're several episodes into this. What surprised you during this making of this podcast? And by that I don't just mean the historical stuff and the business stuff, which is important, but what it meant to people. As I listened to your first episode, I mean, I wasn't part of this type of music, but it was the music of people's lives, it sounded like. And so what surprised you about what it meant to people, for better or for worse? And Andrew, some ways you lived it.
Yeah, I mean, what we're doing with this season is interviewing listeners and fans mostly. And so we've done lots of interviews with lots of people, and a lot of them surprised me, like the way that they, I expected people to be a little bit more, feel kind of how I felt, which was sort of like mad at that industry for, the way that it's been used and the way that it manipulated them as teens, But a lot of the people I thought would be the most mad or have the most reason to are the ones who don't want to let it go, specifically queer people. And
because it's the soundtrack of their life, or because they still embrace the message?
Well, they've reclaimed it in different ways. Yeah, there's a lot of answers to that. But yeah, that was really surprising to me. I was ready to hear people say "burn it all down," but they don't want to burn it all down. So.
Yeah. I think for me, what the most surprising thing has been, as I've been writing this book and working on this podcast, I'll be at a cool gathering like this, and I'll end up in a conversation with someone. I was at a scholarly conference, and I wanted to talk to this political scientist who is super into all the cool stuff that he posts on Twitter or X, whatever we're calling it these days. And so I was really excited to talk with him about that. Instead, for the first 25 minutes, it was a conversation about how much he loved Jars of Clay, and like really in-depth discussion of the catalog. It was great. But also, what's surprising about that is this person who I know in another context, when he started talking with me, I wasn't looking at this very accomplished, nationally known political scientist. I was looking at a youth group kid, and his whole demeanor changed. And I think, in one way, you could say that about any music that people love when they're teens. But there's something I think really specific about that, because it's about your relationship to the divine. And there's a kind of vulnerability there. And so now when I go to anywhere, I expect all of a sudden I'm going to meet youth group kid, not necessarily who they are. And that was a huge surprise and really kind of sweet. And yeah, I cherish those conversations.
So where did the name Rock That Doesn't Roll come from?
I gotta let you get that.
That was me. There's a song from 1975 by Larry Norman of that name. And so I thought, well, that's pithy, you know, it like has rock and roll in the name. But then I thought, you know, it indicates that there's something fundamentally different about this industry, you know, and that it's, you know, there's a lot of ways you could take it. It's lacking something, or has it chosen to be different on purpose, or, you know.
Is there, I mean, not we all, but one of the stereotypes that you hear is that, you know, from movies that you'll see, is that rock and roll is bad. So what made this rock and roll okay? Was it just because it was about God?
Well, I mean, we got to go back to, Leah's book will cover all this, but, you know, rock and roll may not have existed without Christians in the way that it does. So, I mean.
Are you talking about gospel origins? Or
Yeah, Holiness, or Sister Rosetta Tharpe, you know, lots of stuff like that. But then they did reject it eventually.
Yeah, I think that's the interesting thing about rock, is that it's a product. Rock and roll is a product of churches, mostly church culture, and also transgressive. And so there's always a tension. Like, there's always a desire to, like, in some way, the idea is that it connects you with the divine in this really profound way. And it's also very, like, it makes you feel very vulnerable. And so I think there's always tension when it comes to rock and roll. But yes, right, product of the church.
And let me close by saying, you know, Jennifer, from what I can tell, you know, your career meant a lot to kids who grew up with Christian rock in the 90s. Looking back on that, what does that mean to you? What that you hold such an important place in their lives?
Yeah, it's changed over time, and I think you'll find it in exploring the podcast. With a lot of people who are fans of the music, there's been an embarrassment of those of us who've created the music, as much as there's been sometimes an embarrassment of admitting that you're a fan of this kind of music. I've had to deal with that because, like I said, my origins of this were writing from a very genuinely, you know, personal, introspective, and spiritual place. But to have people kind of, I think, especially now over the last 20 or 30 years, to see like the youth group movement and take all of that on, I realized that I was not much older than most of the people that I was performing for. So I think that was fueling, and I purposed at the time to kind of, as a writer, to try and have that conversation in my art and what I was doing. So for me, I felt like that's been about the only saving grace that I've had, that's kind of helped me not be embarrassed about where you found my music, or some of the religious things that I'm not so happy about that I've been aligned with, you know, either on purpose or on accident, or things that I've been angry about that people still, you know, I still have to deal with the fact that people today will still write, you know, Jennifer Knapp, Christian music artist, and I'm like, ugh, like, how many times do I have to drop the F-bomb for you to stop writing that? Like, so I've had to deal with my own embarrassment of that, my own discomfort with where American Christianity is and all that. It's really complicated, but there's something that's pretty amazing about music, that if it's genuinely, I think there's something weird about the integrity of music in its place and in its time, and from the people who are writing in it, no matter what you're into, whether you're a Debbie Gibson fan or a Rolling Stones or a Jennifer Knapp fan. There's something that happens in a culture and a time and a place that music can capture, and can help us be nostalgic and learn from it, and also be proud of who we are in our, you know, who we are today.
Yeah, and to me, I mean, that's what I find so wonderful about your podcast, is it captures all of that, the intertwining of the faith, of the politics, of the exuberance that these people felt. And when I listen to them, it's like, I didn't grow up with that music, but now I want to go listen, because it just has such a powerful effect. Anyway, thank you all for joining us. Moral repair, everybody. Moral repair.
I'm Amanda Barclay.
And I'm Keisha McKenzie.
And we're the hosts of Moral Repair, a Black exploration of tech. So we're gonna go a little in reverse order, and I'd like to invite Dave to come on up. Oh yeah, a whole you.
Okay.
Wonderful.
What are we gonna do?
Oh, just a little ditty.
You don't want to see me dance.
I promise.
They were they were great before, but you don't want to see that.
I was raised right. No dancing involved.
Okay.
But we do want you to participate in activity with us. So if the screen could change to a wheel. This here behind us is the Moral Repair episode wheel. And each episode in the season is represented in this wheel. And when you say spin, obviously the wheel will land on something and there is an activity associated.
Okay.
All right.
Can I win money?
We don't have it.
Okay.
A nonprofit enterprise.
Spin.
Oh my gosh, how did it land on algorithms? Our first episode, so uncanny. So
I feel like I'm being set up.
100%, Dave. So with this, we need you to take out your phone.
My phone. It's the first time I've ever been without it. Hold on.
All right. And as you're looking for it, we'd like to ask, one, your consent to use your phone for the images on your phone to be projected, and then for it to be out in the internet until, kingdom come.
Sure.
I bet. So if we could set it up so that way, Dave, if you could pull up your Instagram and we can mirror your Instagram for the audience.
I'm like a really old guy. I have a really lame Instagram, but I'll do it.
I beg to differ. How about you, Keisha?
I'm rooting for Dave.
Yeah, Team Dave all the way.
My kids set it up. They're like guinea pigs on it and stuff. Let's see that we love.
All right. So Dave,
yes.
whenever you are ready, thank you for pulling up your Instagram. Whenever you're ready, just let it roll. Feel free to comment. And we're just going to go and dig into Dave's Instagram world.
Ed Sheeran. I love Ed Sheeran. I didn't know who he was about 6 months ago. My kids took me to a concert. New album. I want royalties, Ed, for telling them about it. Oh. I am thinking about redoing my bathroom, but I didn't search on that. That's my brother-in-law.
I think Stephen King fans have a lot to look forward to.
That's my publisher. Photography. Yes, nice. My family birds. We do like that. More Ed Sheeran.
And the National Guard.
Okay, I don't know why that's there exactly. More Ed Sheeran. I mean, I like you, Ed, but
Bears.
It's Fat Bear Week. This one I do like.
Oh my gosh. Thank you.
National Park Service is the best.
With Adele.
More ads?
Okay, that I have no idea what it is. Why are they sending me this?
Why are they sending you this?
You got me.
How did it feel, Dave?
Okay. Although I feel like they're spying on me because, I talked about getting my bathroom redone, but I never searched for it. Or maybe I did once.
Yeah, what's the deal with all this Ed Sheeran, by the way?
I like Ed Sheeran.
You're like a super
That
fan
one's me.
secretly?
Yeah, kind of.
Oh, bad. Okay.
Send me tickets, Ed.
But, to be so exposed, one, thank you. So let's give Dave a round of applause. He's a good sport.
Yeah. I mean, I do feel like I'm being spied on a little bit. I mean, Meta is not my friend.
Yeah, that's fair. That's exactly.
And we're going to memorialize this moment, if you don't mind.
Yeah,
How
yeah.
about a selfie? All right.
Everybody say Ed Sheeran.
Ed Sheeran.
There we go.
Wonderful. Thanks, Dave.
Yeah. Thank
And
you.
thanks for supporting our Instagram algorithm.
Yes.
With that.
So the first episode of Moral Repair, Black Exploration of Tech is about recommendation algorithms. And when you hear it, you'll meet an extraordinary collection of folks. The first being Stuart Noyce, a technologist and marketer who helped to shape the internet in its early phases with IBM and Sun Microsystems.
And the second you'll meet is Reverend Dr. Sakina Young Skaggs, who is a womanist, theologian, philosopher, and her work specializes in using sci-fi and Afrofuturism to bring about Black joy.
We talk with Stuart about what recommendation algorithms are, how much data is necessary to power them, and then the surveillance tracking and data collection system that entraps all of us just to make that system go.
And then we talk to Rev. Dr. Sis about how do we actually move through and live in this? How do we manage the reality that we're in? And so we lean on her to tell us about sci-fi and the ways in which we can live a better life, like actually imagine and live that future, not just think about it.
So beyond their content expertise, what was it about these two people that made you really want to have them on the show?
Okay, so I've known Stuart and Rev. Dr. Sis for some time, and you know, the internet's something we all use often, and rarely do we know people who like helped to create it and build it. And it's like they're born in the 1600s and they don't exist anymore. So with Stuart, it was super easy, right? He's a great guy, his ethic is wonderful, and he believes that technology can be used to create a better future and empower our self-determination. And he could really explain what is going on in the internet. Rev. Dr. Sis, on the other hand, is like, she reminds me of like this warm cup of like tea, Earl Grey hot, as you'll hear about in the episode. And she's also my supervisor, she's my mentor, and her big thing is how do we create community and how do we live it? A huge part of Black ethic for her is not just theory, but also praxis. So you have to have both, and she gives us both.
And all of the other guests that we engage on the show are equally grounded, brilliant, and I'm really excited for you to be able to hear and share their wisdom as well during the season. One of the things I hope that listeners leave our episodes with is a sense of grounding in the use of technology in ways that are humane, a connection to diverse sources of spiritual wisdom and knowledge, and being challenged a little bit by what they learn about technological infrastructure.
Coming from a technological communicator, this makes a lot of sense. You know, one of the hopes I have as a chaplain, as a death doula, as a reverend, is that we begin to normalize our spiritual, our emotional, and existential lives and find them just as valuable as intellect, which is, I think, a major crisis during this period of time. Like, you need the spiritual, the emotional, and the existential for vitality in life and flourishing.
So we've had an amazing team behind us, and you're going to hear more about them at the end of the show. But thank you for being here tonight and being in our corner as we launch out into the world, all 4 of our shows.
Yeah. Dave, you're a real one, and we're ready to have that talk.
Come chat. Come chat. So, I want to say what really excites me about this podcast is you're tackling something that is an enduring question. That is, what does it mean to be moral? What do we owe each other? And if we think of corporations as citizens, what do they owe us? And you're also interweaving that with technology, where things are changing so fast that kind of the principles we've had for a long time might not apply anymore. You know, we can do things at scale that we never could before. So I want to ask you, what led you to want to tackle this big question? And is it from your personal lives, from your professional lives? Where did this impetus come from?
Yeah, okay, so I pastored in Palo Alto. That was my first call, and it was after trying to get ordained, being queer, so trying to get ordained for 6 years. And I was like, great, I'm in this church, I'm very excited. And then I'm like, there is something weird. Like, what is
You mean ministering to Silicon Valley?
Ministering to Silicon Valley. I'm like, I'm in people's homes and their lives, hearing what's going on. And there's so much care for not just the work that they do, but also the people whom they love. But I look at the products that are being created. I'm not saying it's like directly from them, but the products being created, I'm like, there's a major disconnect going on here.
No, it's really well known that a lot of the tech titans refuse to let their kids use these products.
Yes, a lot of my parishioners were very much that way. And so for me, that was huge. And also living in the Bay Area and seeing the devastation of tent cities, which are really slums, right? And so we're talking about tech as a utopia here to save the world, and my lived experience was something quite different.
Well, they are building that new city in California.
Oh, God bless.
The tech titans. Yes. No, but I mean, the Bay Area and New York are probably the 2 places where you can see that juxtaposition in a really stark way.
Yeah, extremes in value and extremes in experience. But my background as a technical communicator gives me a sensibility for how do we get to own the impact that humans have on the technologies that develop, and how do we make those values explicit so we get to engage and debate them, not just take them as givens or natural. And then from my Adventist background, I'm thinking often about how society is set up in ways that don't serve human well-being or well-being in life. And if we take the wisdom from religion and from culture and the wisdoms that are inherent in many of our disciplines and then put them together, then we have new lenses for evaluating the technologies that are emerging right now and shaping all of us, often without our thinking about it.
Well, that's what I wanted to explore with you a little bit more is, the society in general that we live in now tends to have some disdain for the past. That is, we can do it better. We have the technology, to quote the Bionic Man, for those of you who might be old enough like me, remember that. But, why should we look back at what's come before? But one of the points we often make on my show, How God Works, is that just because something is old doesn't mean it's foolish. Doesn't mean it's wise, but doesn't mean it's foolish. You have to approach that humbly. And so I'm wondering, you mentioned you're looking to older traditions, philosophical ideas, spiritual ideas. Which traditions do you draw on?
So Africana is an academic term for all Black. So by all Black, we mean the continent, we mean the diaspora, we mean like folks out in the middle, like podunk Russia, right? So all kinds of Black thought, spirituality, and philosophy. And so we are literally drawing upon the well of Africana wisdom, philosophy, and culture. So all of Black culture. And in particular, because if we think about history, which you don't like to look back on, you're right. But I think there's a very unique wisdom that Black people have to offer as it relates to Western technological innovation.
How so?
Well, if you think of the Dutch sail, wind-powered, I mean, the transatlantic slave trade, and so you have, and also colonialism on the continent, right? And so if you think about a people who have, over time, naturally had to deal with such moral injuries that actually intersect with technology, which is not often talked about, right?
It's funny, when we think about technology, I'm thinking of this, but you're right. At the time, that was a huge technology that allowed a lot of harm to be done.
A lot of harm to be done, you know?
So our tools don't outstrip our ethics. So it's a matter of allowing people space to use the question of not just can we make something, should we make something, and then once it is made, how do we use it in a direction that supports life?
Right.
Yeah, in business, we hear a lot, in policymaking, we hear a lot about, as you said, this idea of moral hazard. But the idea of moral repair, how do we remedy things? How do we, because we're going to make mistakes. We're in uncharted territory. How do we fix it? That's really important. And so, and that's why you're here.
Yes.
but how do we do that?
I mean, we're not in the business of fixing.
Yeah.
But I think a part of it is conversation and drawing upon those wisdom moments. So in the Akan tradition, there's this word Sankofa. And Sankofa literally means to go back and to fetch it. So you go back to the past, the wisdom of the past, and you fetch it to understand your knowledge of the present and to create a better future. And so you must have the past. We must look at it. And also acknowledge that there's a wisdom tradition that has come from that. And even if it's some unwise actions, we can learn from that. So in that sense, there's still wisdom. And so, yeah.
And in the definitions of moral repair that we talk about on the show, one of the core themes in there is relationship. And so from ecology and from Black cultures, there's a real strong sense that relationship between peers, relationship between past and present, relationship between human and non-human, all of those relationships matter as a way of saying, this is what it means to flourish together in community. This is what it means to use tools and wield them well, not for destructive ends. And so that's the sensibility that we're bringing. And the sense of restoring relationship and building up communities, that's what moral repair can look like.
Yeah.
And it's not woo-woo, like it's practical.
Yeah.
It's actually practical.
No, it is. I mean, what you said, I'm still sitting here thinking about it. When I hear the word technology, I think of iPhone. But whether it's the printing press, the Dutch sail, technology is nothing new.
No.
We've had this challenge for a long time.
Yes.
So when you raise these issues in Silicon Valley, which is on the cutting edge, on the bleeding edge of technology, do you get a hubristic, yeah, we know what we're doing, we're ahead of everybody else, or do you sense that there is a humility out there that's willing to look back?
I think that it is a both and. You know, the way I go about my work as a chaplain, I'm no longer at a church, but as a chaplain, as I sit and listen to people, it's the healing power of being heard. And so in those moments where I'm in a session with somebody who is, you know, tech or STEM, it's more just like hearing their pains, because they have pain too about what's going on in tech.
They're conflicted.
There's not just conflicted. Some folks are conflicted, but some folks are actually pained by the culture that is already, like, the origin isn't just the end product, right? There's something in the water, and the water is the poison well poisons everybody, right?
The other thing I'd say is that thanks to the internet, there really isn't a frontier, so to speak. Everybody's on the bleeding edge of technology because we're all shaped by it. When we think about surveillance culture, for example, it doesn't just start with Meta and your algorithm, it's also at every border. When you come back into the country, you're giving your eyeballs and your fingerprints, and that's an example of surveillance culture spreading and affecting everybody, no matter where you are. So thinking about technology only in terms of one location, it might begin with the ideologies of California, but it doesn't end there. And so thinking about global impacts, which we do because we're thinking about Africana communities spread across the planet and how that wisdom can help everybody, it's got to be a geographically distributed sense.
Yeah.
One of the words we've heard a lot tonight, both by hosts and creators and PRX itself, is this idea of empathy. And if we have empathy for each other, we can understand each other. That helps us do the right thing. But with technology, all those innate mechanisms for empathy kind of aren't there. You know, it's easy to surveil people when you're not spying on them, hiding behind corners, but when you're just collecting data. Or it's easy to be a drone fighter and to kill people because it feels like you're playing a video game and you're not seeing the pain in their face because you're not there. And so do you think that the type of technology we're dealing with now, where we can cause we can lead to wonderful benefits or immense harm at a scale we never could before, what's the danger of that? Does it make it harder because we don't have that direct contact?
I think the drone example is really salient, really rich, because those drone operators do have immense moral injury because of their work. And that drives a lot of the mental health or mental unwellness that comes from people coming back from those wars or those roles in those wars. I think you see empathy as a theme in technological training. So we talked to a technologist in one of our episodes about using empathy as a way to help train the next generation of data scientists, for example. And we also talked to another about helping us think, okay, as I'm collecting this data, how about I only collect as much data as I must need and no more, instead of just dragnetting all the possible data I could ever use forever, but thinking at the beginning of boundarying that immense power that has now come to us. Like, those are the questions that these folks are asking now because of the risks, because of the harms.
Yeah. You know, when I think about moral injury, you know, it's a fairly new term. It's a term for suffering, but it expresses in the body, right? So it shows up, and it's often a comorbidity with PTSD. But if you treat PTSD and somebody has moral injury, you're not going to treat the moral injury. You're just going to treat the PTSD. And so in moral injury, it's also just a natural phenomenon, right? It occurs when your particular belief or value system that you had no longer serves you, or you feel betrayed by it. So a great example with drones. A lot of armed services have moral injury with drones because they're like, I don't believe in murdering all of these people, right? But they have to follow a command and complete a mission. And obviously that has a spiritual effect. That's where moral injury deals with, right? The spiritual or the belief system. And so when I think about Silicon Valley and I think about technology and empathy, to me, like if we can get to empathy, that's wonderful. I want to boundary empathy with compassion. Because when you empathize with somebody, you're gonna bleed when they bleed. You're gonna go crying when they cry. And at some point, it
can be overwhelming.
Yes. And then we can't, progress isn't the right word, right? Like, but the idea that how do we move forward with intention? Because we really are woven together. And we're on this rock that is not looking too good with the climate change right now, right?
No.
And it's real. So how do we deal with it and be honest?
I think I have a colleague who is at a business school, and I'm being encouraged by this because he's teaching a course on morality and character, and what he's trying to convince these folks of is, so much about business life is optimization. How do we optimize profits? How do we optimize algorithms? And what he says is, decision making is about optimization. Morality is about choice. We have to make a choice. It's not a formula. We have to decide which wisdom we're going to embrace and how we're going to do it. And so I thank you for bringing this conversation to everyone.
Thank you, Dave.
Thank you. All right, everybody. That is the end of our event for tonight. Please give another round of applause to all of our content creators, to the folks at PRX and the Templeton Foundation, to Jennifer Knapp, and to many members on each of the teams who couldn't join us tonight, but who are integral parts of making these shows. And the first episodes are out. Find them wherever you listen. Thanks for joining us.